Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Nomad Strength Show. And today we've got a guest that I am extremely excited to talk to, mainly because I've been a follower of his account for a couple of years since it started. And in the last month and a half, 2 months maybe, it's exploded. And it just makes me so happy to see that it's getting the recognition that I think it deserves because of what it is that he does. And the account is Code of the West, and the person behind it is Chris Hunt. And I'm just really pumped to be able to chat with Chris about all of this stuff with his mission, with what he wanted Code of the West to be, what he envisioned as this mission, and what it's turned into, frankly, in the last couple of months. As of the time of the recording of this episode, he was around like 60,000 ish something followers. And as of the time of me recording this intro a week or two later, it's up to over 75,000. I mean, at the beginning of February, he had like 5,000. So it's really just exploded. And it's awesome because the style with which he creates things is very unique. He's an artist who got his start and has cut his teeth in comic books, and shares some great stories with us about how he really came up in that world and getting to work with just titans in the comic book industry, and how that shifted away from comic books for a long time, got into just regular work, and art was always something that kept poking its head wherever he was. And it's actually a very motivational talk we had today about just following things that you know you're supposed to be doing and doing them really, really well. There's a lot of really good nuggets in here that I think you're going to enjoy. And I actually wanted to start or finish this intro, a little bit differently than I normally would, because one of the things that Chris put up on his Instagram page a few weeks back, it's probably been longer than that now, but it's a video that he put images and clips to a wonderful piece of audio from Paul Harvey, from a piece that he did called Freedom to Chains back in 1965. And I just want to play that piece with the music bed that Chris put underneath it. And I would encourage you to go find it. It's his number one pinned post, and look at the visuals that he puts with it. And that video in itself will really give you an idea, I think, of what the Code of the West is. And I really think you guys are going to enjoy this. And I hope that you go follow and support what he's doing. He's got amazing art. He has amazing designs that are up on his merch store, where his art is on t-shirts and mugs and all kinds of stuff up there. So go check it out, support what he's doing. And I really think you guys are going to enjoy this episode. So before we hit into the episode, I just want you to listen to this audio.
How come, after thousands of years of experiment, our new nation has come so far so fast? All this in less than 200 years. What is the secret of our success? Well, I think it had to do with a basic American's creed. Perhaps it never passed the pioneer's lips in this form, but if it had, I think he would have said something like this: I believe in my God, in my country, and in myself. I know that sounds like a trite, too simple thing to say, and yet it's a rare man today who will dare to stand up and say, I believe in my God and my country and in myself, and in that order. Well, sir, when that early pioneer turned his eyes toward the West, he didn't demand that somebody else look after him. He didn't demand a free education. He didn't demand a guaranteed rocking chair at eventide. He didn't demand that somebody else take care of him if he got ill or got old. There was an old-fashioned philosophy in those days that a man was supposed to provide for his own and for his own future. He didn't demand a maximum amount of money for a minimum amount of work. Nor did he expect pay for no work at all. Come to think of it, he didn't demand anything. That hard-handed pioneer just looked out there at the rolling plains, stretching away to the tall green mountains, and then lifted his eyes to the blue skies and said, thank you, God. Now I can take it from here.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Nomad Strength Show. Today, I am joined by, if you follow on Instagram, the page is Code of the West, and it's extremely popped off in the last handful of weeks, which has been really fun to see, because I think I've probably been following since you had 1,500 or 2,000 followers or so.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool. But I'm joined by Chris Hunt, the creator of Code of the West, artist. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we can attach as what you do. You do a lot of stuff, man. And
Yeah.
I'm pumped to have you on and just chat and see where it goes today, man. Thanks for making time.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, because it's been, I live by myself in Salt Lake, and so as everything has popped off, I've been sort of just, I mean, I do see humans every once in a while, but
Right.
it's just been those and you're like, what the hell's going on? What is this? Like, and just sort of like pacing the apartment taxi driver style and just working
Yeah,
out, and then just kind of like, what is this? Like, not really anybody to talk to, so this is kind of nice.
sure. Because one of the things I love and I think I probably want to start here. I love comic books. And that's where I see the type of art that you do is, and you illustrate for comic books. Why that medium when you were starting, whatever your genesis point of being, I want to draw, I want to be an artist, like, was it just going flipping through comic books? Like, how did that whole,
Basically.
yeah, how did that all start for you? What was the pull to that?
Well, I was, kind of a latchkey kid, hung around adults all the time, and my
Sure.
parents split sheets, so I was about five, and only child at the time, and so you entertain yourself however you can. And for some reason, I just like drawing from the beginning. It just seemed like I was always a perfectionist, and I remember getting frustrated trying to color coloring books, because I could see the lines, and I guess somewhere along the line. Boom, boom. I was like, I'll just make my own lines, basically, kids
Yeah.
love. And so I was always drawing, and I like it was as a socially awkward kid around other kids, it was a way to sort of have like a bit of currency amongst
Sure.
kids. And so I was just doing that, chilling around. And then when I was about 10, we moved to Idaho, but I go back in the summer times. And my aunt and uncle, they were kind of cool, and like they were artists, musicians, and back in Ohio. And so they were friends with a guy who was self-publishing comics at that time in Columbus. And for some reason, they just thought that I liked what he was doing,
Hmm.
and they gave me his comic. It's called THB, and they explained it to me like, this is just a dude we know. Like, he is
Yeah.
just, this is his idea, this is his world, and he's just doing this. And I was in my mind like, that sounds like an amazing job, to just
Mhm.
have your imagination and just build a world and tell stories. And like in a naive way. I remember being on the floor, I guess, when I'm reading this comic on a terrible shag green carpet, and being like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do. Like, this, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna do this. And then over the ensuing years, the practical reality, this is like late 90s, early internet 1.0, basically. There's no
Sure.
YouTube. There's no way to really research this stuff. So I might happen to go to books, like physical paper books, a library, and it basically just reverse engineering stuff. And that was interesting. I also got related to storytelling and video at the time, because video was in its nascence as far as digital video goes.
Right. Yeah.
And so we were doing stuff in high school where we were shooting like a high cameras, doing digital capture into the old Macs and One Premiere and Final Cut Pro. So that was cool. I was seeing the correlation between visual storytelling mediums and prose. There's also, I'm even weirder than you realize. Like, so at the same time, I was doing theater and playwriting. Like, I
Yeah.
almost flunked out of high school for being a repertory theater company. I was like traveling around,
Okay.
and then I also was in playwriting, and so I'm like writing short videos and stories in high school, or shooting them, like storyboarding them. I'm like 16, 17.
Yeah.
We're doing like car chases with M3s in high
Yeah.
school, where we're like going 130 miles an hour on the open streets with traffic. It's nuts. Like, but I was like saying like, oh, if you plan this, I have all these different, and they're like, as an autodidact, but like, they were in an ace, or I was in an ace as far as my skill set goes. But I was like, man, this is cool. Like,
Mhm.
I can do all this stuff and kind of like tell stories. And so really, even though comics were always at the top of the heap for me, I always saw the correlation between all these different mediums and the ability to tell stories.
Sure.
So to try to like condense it down a little bit, I thought I was going to go to art school, got accepted at prestigious art schools, and even got some scholarships, and like pretty quickly realized I was not going to learn how to make comics. So I was going to be really dense.
Mm.
So it was like no art school, and for some reason I was like no comics. Like I don't know why at that time, I was thinking,
Interesting.
well, if I can't go to school for it, and there's no school that exists for it, then I guess I'm going to do something else. And everybody in my family's all blue collar business owners, so I once again naively thought, well, I'll go to college and I'll learn business, and I'll learn all the relevant information, and I'll opt to races. And showed up on the first day and realized I was retaking like my 7th grade accelerated classes. I was paying for it, and rather than be a smart person and be like, well, I aced all these, I was like, nope. Just played poker and went to jujitsu and economics for 2 semesters, and then I flunked out. Um, and so after that, I went and worked for Starbucks, oddly enough. And
Yeah.
because I realized that they had this like really great mentorship program, and you could learn. I found like the best manager in the area, and it was like, I'm gonna be a store manager. And he's like, okay. And he taught me how to do it. And at like 22, I was running a store that was grossing like $1.3 million a year that I'd opened in this like 40-hour push. It was insane. I loved
Wow.
it. It was great. But so like in this really early period of life, I went art, nope, business, oh, or I went art school, nope, business, customer service at Starbucks. And then when I was at Starbucks, so this is like early 2004. Paul, that guy I mentioned to you,
Yeah.
that it was comic I read. He released this awesome Batman book called Batman Year 100. And I basically just like, don't comics, not that big about it anymore. Found this comic, and I always follow his career. He's always been developing and growing like in front of you. Like, you just see him get better. And so I had seen him for a few years, and this Batman book comes out. I'm like, holy shit,
Yeah.
this is amazing. And like, everything I've been pushing down for years, as far as like why I couldn't do it, why I wouldn't want to do it, why I shouldn't do it, it just like bobbed up. And I couldn't unsee it at that point. And kind of, I mean, I was kind of pissed, to be honest with you. Like,
Yeah.
to have like the existential self realization of like, now I know I can't, now I know I want this for sure, even after I
Right.
left it. So now this is a conscious decision on my part, whether or not I do this, as
Sure.
opposed to something I just shut in my brain. So Flickr was a thing at this point in time, which used to
Yeah.
be, it's still there, but it's like Yahoo's photo sharing website. And because this is before Facebook even had like photos on it. Like you were just messaging people.
Right.
So Flickr was a way to put pictures up and write things underneath them. Sounds pretty common now, but it wasn't really a thing back then. And
Right.
so I found Paul on Flickr and was following along, and I was just like, I remember even feeling right now, it's like this anxiety, oh my God, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. And I was trying to like reverse engineer it without YouTube, without, anything. I'm like, what kind of brushes, what kind of paper? And finally, then for years since I was a kid, thought about sending him a letter, like a handwritten letter. I've written handwritten letters numerous times and never sent them. And I was like, I wonder if he'll just tell me what kind of paper to use. So I sent him a message on Flickr. Like, hey, I'm sorry to bother you. Been calling you for a long time. You still made an uncle. Basically, just I'm like about ready to like jump into traffic. Just please tell me if you can what kind of brushes, what kind of paper, what kind of ink. I will never bother you again. Like 25 minutes later, he responded and he's like, "These are your brushes. This is the paper. This is how you clean a brush. This is how long you can use it before it gets conked up." Like, and he's like, "You're gonna hate your first 1,000 ink drawings. Heads up." So, just get after it. And I remember that just clicking in my head, being like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. So, I wouldn't start things if I didn't think I could just immediately be good at them. But somehow my job then became to suck for 1,000. And then it became like a fun game to just start checking them off.
Yeah.
And Paul was following along. I basically just went, well, what of 1,000 and put a picture up. And then what, 2 of 1,000, put a picture up.
Actually counting 1,000.
Yeah. And so Paul's like, oh, this is actually not that bad. Like, hey, good job. Like, that's better than my second year or whatever. It's just, I was kind of like, it just became addicting at that point. And it became like almost sort of like, it became my life and sort of like my way of structuring how I moved through the world was like failing in front of people like publicly as something that I loved. And then realizing that I'm basically like, I look at stuff and go, this is terrible. And people go like, oh, that's really good. And I'm like, okay, so I'm actually not the best measurement
Yeah.
of what is good or bad.
Sure.
So I should just keep going and just keep doing things. And yeah, so without going into like an hour of comics, I just didn't stop. And then I ended up becoming friends with Paul. He ended up becoming a mentor. I ended up moving into work for a few years. I was an assistant.
Oh, that's cool.
It's super cool. I mean, there's like a whole there's a whole weird backstory, origin story. But
So where was he in the midst of the comic book world? Because I mean, I wasn't super
Kid
embedded
about
where I
which
would
one?
have, I mean, I wasn't super embedded into it where I would know, more than maybe a couple of different of the artists like that did some of the big ones. But like in terms of a lot of the stuff, where was he in, like, what was the main things he did were some big ones? You mentioned the Batman one, but like what other
Yeah,
kind of things did he do?
yeah. Batman was big. He's kind of like in the pantheon of Batman artists now.
Yeah.
I who did he work? He was working on his first, not his first, but like his first big intellectual property for a big publisher, because he
Okay.
owned and did his own thing with that first comic that I read. He also worked in Japan in the late 90s for Kodansha, so which is still not really common, to be honest with you. They don't let American artists kind of come over there and try to be mangaka. And so this is, I don't really talk about this that often because it feels kind of weird to say it, but I think it's pertinent here. So like, I'm kind of like a part of this whole lineage of comics. Almost like there was like a mason,
Sure.
I'm like as in like a mason, like an actual mason
Sure.
work with stone. Like
Yep.
you learn from somebody, you pass the knowledge on.
Apprenticeship
So
style.
yeah, yeah. And so there's like people who I've been inspired by, that were inspired by Paul. Then there's people who like taught Paul, and were with Paul, especially on that Batman book. So this is crazy, but like, I lived in New York since D2 came out, the movie, and Paul got invited with a bunch of DC people to go to this private screening at the Bowery Hotel. He's like, "Do you want to go?" I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And still, if you're a comic book nerd, like if you like DC, if the room had blown up, basically like North American Comics would have been donezo.
Yeah.
Who was there? And I like was sitting next to Jed, who was this amazing graphic designer. He's the guy who designed the Jurassic Park logo, if that's any indication.
Okay.
I don't really know Chip Jed is at this point. He's just a nice guy that I'm talking to sitting
Yeah.
there. We watch the movie, Josh Brolin comes out, and I'm like, this is cool. And then there's this, after the movie, there's this like, kind of, not like party, but like a gathering downstairs.
Yeah.
And Frank Miller, who was a creator since sitting
Yeah.
in the high back chair. And Paul's like, hey, like, follow me. And takes me over to Frank. So Frank was one of Paul's mentors. So like, I don't even know if Frank will remember this, to be honest with you. Like, but like, Paul takes me in front of Frank Miller, introduces me, and says he's the next one. Like he's the one I'm giving the fire to. Like, and it was
Wow.
just like, it's just a moment in my journey, because Frank Miller is kind of like, okay, like,
Yeah.
but
That's
to have
awesome.
like, to be the little kid though that was like sitting on the floor reading the comic, from the guy he's never met, to then being with that guy, and then being in this, I mean, it's a hero's journey to me. I'm not saying I'm a hero or a heroic figure, but it's like, it's that journey. It's like archetypal. And like, even though like, that moment didn't change my life on a mechanical level, it reinforced what I was doing was the right path, if that makes sense. It's just what sucked is, in like, I realized my path kind of needed to diverge from comics directly at a certain point.
Interesting. Yeah, dude, Frank Miller, he's absolutely one of my favorites. Like, I
I
think he's
right now, even like we're remembering this. It's just like, because I don't really get starstruck. I don't look at people that way typically. Like, and even then, it's like fresh human. But it was like the circumstances and why and how. I've been pretty fortunate just by following my gut and trying to be like as true to that intention as possible. Like, it definitely looks weird to people at times, because people think I should be going right and I'm going left.
Sure.
But it's because I've gone left 2-3 years down the road that something like that happens.
Yeah. I remember, and it's because of the age. So I'm almost 32.
Okay, a little older
So,
than you.
yep. So where I fall in a lot of this stuff, like a lot of his comics, like the Dark Knight Returns, I was too young to read, but
Yeah.
that was the first of the animated movies that I remember seeing
Mm-hmm.
of Batman, where the
Peter
part one
Weller
and
has
part
the
two.
voice
Yeah.
of Batman.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I mean that was like my first introduction to him. And then like you go on the whole, I mean, and for me, Batman was like the one where that's how I got into all of it,
Me
because
too.
I loved all of like Brian Bolland when did Killing Joke, and
Mm-hmm.
like all of those different ones. I like that was where I learned a lot of those guys, and then really got into the art piece. And that's like even today, I have friends that kind of tease me about it, but the animated movies that they've made that were basically just the straight up adaptations from a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these comics are like they're better than most of the live action movies that have been made in the
Oh
last
yeah,
20
that's
years as
one
far
thing
as the
DC
storytelling.
done really well. Like
Yeah.
the live action stuff kind of struggle to find its sea legs, but the narrative animation stuff is
Yeah.
they've killed at that.
Yeah, really well done stuff. So it's really cool. That's such a cool story. So from that moment when you have this realization, or this like okay, damn, like I'm here now. I'm doing
I
this, and
lost you
it's
there a little
been.
bit. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm
Oh,
gonna need to catch up here for a second. Oh, there you're
you
back.
got me.
Yeah, the
Yeah. So
realization.
yeah, so you have that moment, sitting in front of him, and you get this praise, and you're like, okay, damn, this is like what I'm doing now, right?
Yeah.
So from that moment, how did you come into like this style of what eventually became Code of the West? But like, what's that gap to where now it's like now you're creating your own stuff, and it's like, how did you kind of find your footing with what you liked to create, and then that kind of turned itself into what you're doing now? So like, what
Yeah.
was that little journey and gap like there?
Well, at the time when I went to staying with Paul, since the Sin City thing, I was working on Carver, which was my graphic novel, and that was the first time I was like, I sing my song,
Yeah.
And that was also kind of like man, I'm doing it all year long, like,
Mm-hmm.
because at that time comics were already becoming like you try to pitch a comic, it's either be a TV show or a movie. And if you
Sure.
know anything about TV shows and movies, you don't pitch black and white, you don't pitch a period piece, and I was
Mm.
black and white 1920s.
Okay.
Getting action adventure, which is not really a thing even now, so it's kind of struggling to kind of come back around. Even though I think plenty of people still love those types of stories,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was my methodology. Where it's like, man, I want to see these stories. No one's doing them. I'm gonna do it, which is gonna come back to play in Code of the West here. So
Yeah.
so I go ahead and do it and work on it. And Frank and Paul both kind of had this sort of like, they were still doing those kind of stories to some extent, but they're at the top. They can basically walk into any of these places and go like, I'm going to draw a picture, sir, about a rabbit, and he's going to have Solid Thomas Boss or something. And they're like, okay, cool, man. Like, yeah,
Sweet.
go
Do
for
what
it.
you want.
Yeah. And so I got through Carver, didn't ship that, but it also didn't like change my life or my career, even though like it
Sure.
won, IGN Grout Novel of the Year, and I was like, that's cool, but like no one's calling.
Yeah.
And so that part of it was just survival. Like, after Carver came out, I was like, I gotta work. I gotta figure out how to make money. And people were coming up to me, people who were like really high up in the industry going, this is great. This is amazing. You did something really awesome. You should be proud of. And then like people who were on the same level as me or like who were peers that could be jobs or editors or working publishers, just critics. So it was this really weird dichotomy or cognitive dissonance rather, where I'm like, okay, I believe what people are saying, that they like this, but I would think that if people like it, it would lead to me being able to get work. And it wasn't happening. And I was kind of taking these like really not good jobs just to pay the bills. And I was like, this is miserable. This is the opposite of why I started doing this.
Yeah.
This is my dream. Why am I doing it this way? And so initially I just left comics, just straight up. I was like, I'm done. I'm just gonna go find a job. Then I ended up working at I was an assistant store manager at a Filson store that was opening up in Ohio. So I'd gone back to Ohio to help my grandparents out. And since I was location agnostic, and I was like, this is a happy place. I worked there when I was in New York. All the friends met, again, a left turn that people thought was not right. Because I went to New York to do comics, and they're like, working at a Filson store. I'm like, this is great. I was in the one actually using a True Maintenance crew, like 3 weeks before I went to New York. I went to New York with the same Osprey pack on my back that I carried to the mountains. So like,
Yeah.
to be able to have like a little bit of home in New York City, work part time, this is great.
Yeah.
This also comes into play later with Total West. Me choosing to do that thing, even though people were criticizing it. So, do car, go to Ohio, work at Schulzen again, and I'm good. I'm good at managing. I'm really good at selling stuff, and I love Schulzen. And I was mentoring, and the guy who was the store manager kind of checked out and ended up getting fired, and I had to go to Seattle where Philson is headquartered for like a store manager meeting, even though I wasn't a store manager. And I was like, this is cool. I get to go to Mecca. I get free ride to Seattle, whatever. And then on like the second day, I'm up looking at product with all the store managers, and I'm just sketching. I even though I'm not drawing comicsy where I can't help it, I'm just drawing in front of me. And I feel like a tap on the back of my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's this middle-aged woman who's very nice and French, and it's like, oh, you can draw. It's like, oh yeah, no, I can draw. And she's like, well, basically like, why do you draw? I'm like, oh, I just make comics, like, and she's really? I was like, yeah, they're kind of like European comics, but she's like, really, what kind of European comics? I was like, do you know European comics? And she's like, Crunch. I'm like, Corto Maltese? She's like, you know Corto Maltese? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, you know who else likes Corto Maltese? It's Alex. And I'm like, who's Alex? And he was like, Alex is the chief creative director of Schulzen. I'm like, okay.
No kidding.
Fast forward, I ended up like eventually having to leave the store, and I was just a consultant for Filson after this conversation. Like basically just the New York moment, the I'm done with comics moment, and the like I'm just gonna sketch moment led to basically the path that led to Black Rifle, and that the path that led to Clover West.
Yep.
I always liked these ideas, the Jack London, Hemingway, the Louis L'Amour, but I was trying to have a career, and I thought like I would be drawing fucking Batman, or like, here's my new concept. It's robots and zombies who romance with each other. Like, make my TV show.
Right.
And I was trying not to do that strictly, and I was like, Carver was kind of like one for me, one for them kind of thing. But once I had let go of like having a career in comics and trying to make that a sustainable thing, I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do what I want to do now. And, again, when Black Rifle showed up, I was doing Schulzen stuff, and Evan was like, rescue me like a sort of a lost cat. In that, like, I'd always, when I was at Filson, I saw like the potential of storytelling. Basically, branding is storytelling. It's just like, they don't talk about it the right way. And it's like half of the equation, especially like with marketing, all these things where it's like, let's show cool guys doing cool stuff and say, cool. Is that a story though? Like, that's his activity. Those are just things that are happening that they're well shot and cool. You're going for a vibe. Maybe you're going for a narrative, but for the most part, you're just stringing shit together. And in my head, I'm like, man, you could like just tell a story. Like, like Filson at the time was like 130 years old. You got Levi's as almost equivalently as old. Like, they had stories by accident. Just for the sheer length of time that they've been around, there were people who interacted with it that had led to this legend. In my mind, I'm like, well, if you're new, if you're 10 years old, 5 years old, 10 days old as a company, you can't afford to wait 130 years to figure out what your story is. You have to just curate the story, build the story from the ground up. And so I was playing around at Filson, in the role that I had, which is pretty wide open, honestly. I mean, I basically just created a job for myself, and did a comic, did some other stuff, some products. I don't think they ever got out to the world, but it was fair paid. And then the Black Rifle stuff was trying to that times like cranked up to 11, because Evan was basically like, me rebrand the coffee bags. We're going to go public in a year and a half. I was like one of a half dozen people like drew about that outside of like board or the VC company. Yeah. And I had to get people to do it with me. And the idea was that we tell stories with the bags. Like the value proposition is it's a $15 disposable thing that you feel bad about throwing away. and take and put story and art on that.
Yeah.
Basically, like you go into Toys R Us back in the day and go and look at the G.I. Joe packaging, the Masters of the Universe. You're like, damn, oh, it's the box, but the art's cool.
Don't you feel bad about throwing the box away?
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the logic. And
Yeah.
and so I, over time, I'm going, God damn, everything's story. Everything's a story. And, like identity and social groups, but it's like people stumbled on it. They don't, like Black Rifle is a great example of like, I think, there was all this intention behind what it was and what it served it to, what it was serving. But like, I don't think Matt and Evan and JT and Logan like sat down and, well, I can tell you they didn't sit down and write a title out. Like, it was just this intuition, this gut thing. And I'm like, man, if you could like, I think about Walt Disney a lot and the Disney company, and like, it's different now, obviously, than it was, way different. Back before the dark times, before the emperor.
Right.
Like, Walt was like the center of everything.
Yes.
And like the figurehead, and when he died, because no one had prepared for that eventuality, the company just like imploded for like 10, 15 years.
Yep.
Like the animation went out the door. No one really knew what the arbiter of what was Disney, because that had been involved. And so in my head, like I'm thinking like in terms of all the stuff, like it's not enough to just create the story. You got to also sort of like say like, what is the story? I have to give a hint of something.
Yeah.
Much like when I was pitching a comic book, you can't just be like, you don't go into an office to a publisher and go like, hey man, I've got this idea for like Hemingway meets Indiana Jones and it's gonna be dope. And that's not going to get you a book.
Okay.
Like, yeah, you gotta like. There's a method to the madness. It's almost like an operational order, in the military speak, like, where it's like your one sentence statement. Here's how we're going to do it. Here it is broken down in this sort of microcosm of like step 1 through 5 or whatever. And so all of this, so like it's just compounding interest, or like an exponential curve, where like the through line has always been comics and story time. And I'm realizing like, Jesus, like we're all living inside of these different stories. Two things here. One is that like, that's so much potential. That's so crazy and cool to think of it in those ways. The second thing is, we don't know that we're living inside of a story, which means we're susceptible to manipulation. And so because this is like psychological blind spots, like archetypes, Jungian concepts. It's magic tricks. And if you don't, like, magic is ethical if you understand, if everybody understands it's a trick. It's not ethical if you're using magic trick techniques to subvert, steal, ulterior motive, basically. You gotta be on equal footing with everybody. So yeah, this is kind of like what led to Code of the West, of being like, okay, I know what I like drawing, I know the stories I like to tell, I know the ideals, ideas, and I'm seeing the world run like a chicken with its head cut off, not knowing that things spun up by story, and not knowing that story could also help maybe be a fire extinguisher on things. So that's kind of what got me to this point, with Code of the West, and why I started. Now, it took me like 2 years to figure out how to actually tell the story that I wanted to tell, but that's 1,008 drawings. You just got to fail.
And the thing that I think you may have said it in a comment in response to somebody on that video that I had told you, like I reshared it the other day on that Paul Harvey video, which is, I seriously, in the last like 3 days, I probably watched it 30 times.
Well, something's happening with that, to be honest with you. But, I mean, honestly, like it went from like,
all me, dude. I've just watched it that many times in the last few days.
I appreciate it for it, because the algorithm is looking at it and going like, this is something, because it went from like, quite that this will be pertinent at some point. I want to see what the fuck happened, but like I pinned that, and it went from like 10,000 to 30,000. Yesterday it was at 80,000. Before Instagram stopped working for me like 3 hours ago, it was at like 150,000 views.
That's awesome.
Still like something's happening. But anyways, comment on that video.
Yeah. So somebody had talked about Paul Harvey in a comment and said, like, because he had so many of these great, readings and things that he used to do, talking about really the spirit right? The spirit of the West and just America in general. Like, I think most people who are familiar with Paul Harvey probably have heard, So God Made a Farmer, like which is another one, like, that's the world I'm from, man. Like my dad and half of the people I know and grew up with, that's where I'm from. So it's like, I have a real strong connection to him specifically, because of all that. And like, I remember my grandpa telling me about him when I was little and playing like some of these things for me once he found out that he could find them on the computer, like, and I remember thinking that my grandpa was like one of the most techie people I'd ever met in my life, because he was able to like search stuff. And I'm like, this is awesome. And he'd play these things for me. Right. And so like, I think that's where a lot of it connected for me. But there was, you had said something about like the purpose of this is to sort of tell those same, like have those same types of themes of what the Code of the West is doing akin to what Paul Harvey was doing, those decades ago, to try to capture, like you said, we've been talking about stories, like these stories and this, and really this spirit is like the word I like to use for, because, we've all, spirit of the West is like not not an uncommon phrase.
It's out there, vibe too.
Vibe.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe. But it's very, they're very conjoined together, and that's very similar in that way, where the ability of someone to tell a story that can encapsulate a movement like that, I think, is extremely powerful. Yeah. And there's all of these throughout American history specifically, because I've got a ton of friends from the South, like tons of friends down in the South that I've met through like all the Soronex stuff these last few years. Guys, obviously guys like Brandon and all these other guys that are down there that are heavy steeped in like the Appalachian culture of stuff. Like, and it's interesting to me. You have like the Northeastern, the revolutionary culture around stuff, and all of these things still linger in these places. You know what I mean? And
guys.
Exactly. And so like you go down into the places in the South and you can see like this stuff, like the way that these people talk, the way this has been around for 200 years. You go visit places like Boston and all these other areas and in New England, and you're like, I can see how these things have lingered since the time of revolution and all this kind of thing. And then you like get to the West, and I know it's just because this is where I'm from. Like, I'm Idaho boy. So there's like, it just speaks to me more seeing the imagery first. Like you see cowboys riding in the middle of a sagebrush desert that you can see for 15 miles or more. Like, dude, that's exactly where I grew up. So it's like, I am a desert kid, you know what I mean? And so like, there's part of that I think is a really cool thing, to have something or someone that speaks for that segment and encapsulates that really, which is obviously why I'm so drawn to it. But then you bring in like the stuff where you're doing comic book style stuff. I'm like, there's another inroad for me to be a part of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that was the riddle for me, is like, I was overthinking all that, because I was like, well, I'm not a cowboy. I was raised by cowboys. All the things you're saying I love about the West. And but I'm also this nerd, and I'm a storyteller, and but I'm a nerd storyteller that like has like been punched in the face and knows how to punch back, literally. Yep. And so when I was rereading Louis L'Amour's Education of a Wanderer again, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, he's been around these things. Yes, he's done a lot of things, but like, what his benefit to the West was his ability to talk about the West. It'd be like saying, like, the qualifier for writing Tombstone would be that you had to have like been in it in a shootout at the OK Corral, like, right. No, like, you just have to, but you have to, as a storyteller, you have to understand why and how you're telling the story. And I think that when I realized, like, oh, I don't have to worry about like being the dude or being a dude, it's just about me. Like, I'm coming in and out, flaring in and out. But like, it's not the Chris Hunt Code of the West. It's like the Code of the West. And I just, in theory, like, it should be able to like be something that like I pass over, or it's not. It's through my lens. It's through the choices that I'm making, right now. But and that was the interesting thing about Harvey then too, because like when I made that video, it was like I was getting some traction early in February, so like last month.
Mm-hmm.
That I was like started like, man, I just gotta say what I'm feeling, as opposed to like trying to like, I don't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. I was trying different things, not to
Yeah.
like get following, but to be like, how do I use Instagram? Like
Right.
it basically, because I worked with AMC at one time on a TV show. I did a comic that was tethered to a show called Turn, which is about Washington spies.
I remember that show.
It's cool. I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved the book too. But the woman who I was working with, who wrote the script for the comic, had never written a comic book before. She had written a script for TV show, obviously.
Sure.
And it was a real challenge because she understood the story, but she did not understand the mechanism of the medium that she was working in.
Sure.
And I had this moment where I'm like, oh, Instagram is just a medium. It's actually not this thing to like be like, oh no, it's like, dude, the algorithm's designed to keep you on the platform.
Right.
So like, if you want to be an asshole, it's probably gonna be like, well, assholes only attract other assholes. So like, that's not like a wide net. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know there's like shadow banning and like censoring and all that stuff.
Right.
I'm not saying it isn't. It's just that like, the default of like, well, my content's not being seen for the algorithm. It's like, or your algorithm, or your content sucks, possibly too.
Which is more likely the case with most,
for sure.
with most accounts.
Yeah, and so, that Paul Harvey thing was the first time that I went, man, this sounds like what I'm trying to say. If I could marry it with like what I've seen and done, this could be kind of like sort of a flag in the sand, or like like something that I could kind of stand with, where I'm like, I don't really know how to put it succinctly. Watch this for a minute.
Yeah.
Like here does the spirit, like you said. And I was also the first time where I'm like, oh, Instagram, if it's hard for someone who writes for television to understand how like visually words and imagery have to be married together, well, then of course it's gonna be difficult for Instagram, for us to learn Instagram, because it's sound, it's motion, it's words when you can and should use it, but it's like different planes of that, like it's words within potentially the thing that you're creating, there's words around it in the caption. And I was just like, how do I maximize this as a medium, not so much as a riddle that I need to solve? And that was when I was like, that was when everything kind of popped off, to be honest. When I pushed it as if it was, like I'm going to start writing a novel as opposed to a screenplay. Basically.
That's a really interesting way to think about it too, because it is its own, like, I mean, we say that, and of course it's its own medium. There's its own rules for it. Like,
you say out loud.
Yeah, like it has its own rules in order for it to work maximum effective. Right.
Yeah.
And so once you learn like what those are, it's not the same thing as throwing something up on Twitter or any of these other platforms or mediums. Like, but I think as I'm saying it and as I'm hearing you say it, it probably does lend itself more to a comic style of visual art, right? Because of the nature of what it is. Like, so, and these ones where you've been doing these, like these Louis L'Amour quotes, and then have the Hawk and Horse song in the back, which I love. That reminds me of reading a comic. And I'm like, well, duh, this makes sense.
Wanted to, like, I have a score for Cowboy. Like, there's music that I made for that book. I didn't make it. I worked with somebody.
Sure.
Because I was always like, God, I remember like I'm old, but like there used to be these books where you like at 45 and there'd be this like little like plastic record player, and you could like it's like turn the page, and like they would have like a little bit of music playing, and they had like a little bit of something to augment it. And I was like, oh, it would be cool if you kind of set the stage a little bit with a comic, and you could like this is here's a playlist, or here's X, Y, and Z, and then it's like, oh, now we have visual comics, and even then what was funny is that no one ever leaned into what digital could do with a comic. Like they basically were like, let's just do the digital version of the analog experience, which is like here are pages, you turn them. Whereas, and this is going back to like when I was doing comics in the early teens, and I'm like, shit, if you got a different set of technology and a different medium, you should learn or experiment with that potential. Then, like what could you do with like, obviously you can't have a paper comic and turn the page and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but you could definitely figure out how to do that with a digital comic. And
Yeah.
so that's like, to your point, like, that's what I saw Instagram as something that was like, oh shit. Like, it went from being like, how do I figure this out to being like, oh my God, I could do so many things with this.
Yeah.
Like, and I think perception is a huge part of moving through life anyways, of just, viewing something as a challenge versus something as like, impossible, unattainable thing. Like, it's like, you're just like, I don't know how to do it, but I'll try to figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
people typically figure it out. And so, like, I get also remired in social media 1.0 and then like this sort of 1.5. Like 1.0 would be like, the people with accounts that are 300,000 followers and they just look at people. Like,
Yeah.
meaning that, like, it's just like, hey, good morning, here's a photo in the mirror. And it's like, I think you see these things out loud, it's like, their account is basically 300,000 people looking at them,
Yeah.
which is bizarre to think about. And you have
Yep.
1.5, I think, which is, brands who started realizing like Black Rifle, I think, where it's like, hey, look, we're out doing stuff. We're doing cool stuff. We're putting a Gatling gun on a Prius. We're, we are one strong, and it is not by any. This is just like the evolution of the washing. And I think that, again, the 1.5 aspect is like people intuitively like, oh, we need to like do more. Like, we need to like, we can't, it's not enough to just be like, hey, look, here's a t-shirt. I mean, because I think really what people were treating Instagram like was like a shop window where you just watch the shit up there, like
Yep.
a community bulletin board, and people walk by and go like, oh, that's cool. And then they keep going,
Yep.
and then basically like everybody's running down the street metaphorically, going, yeah, no, come back, come back. I'll give you like $5 if you hang out for a little bit and just like
Yep.
interact for a second. When really what we should be doing is putting something in the window that stops people and makes them want to come inside. And I think intuitively that was the intention, but I feel that we're still stuck in this phase where it's just like it's a look at me that if it's supposed
Uh-huh.
to it come in here with me.
Right.
Like that's the difference. I mean, well, I don't think that was my intention behind Go to the West. It took me a while to figure out how to say it, and I think that's for I didn't say I think because I don't really know what the fuck happened. This is just all an experiment.
Been a wild
Um,
month.
yeah, I think people were like, okay, just like
Mm-hmm.
like it was like, all right, yeah, I'll come in, I'll check it out. Like, it as opposed to like, I don't. Do you ever go like trade shows or anything like nice
Every once in a
shows?
while. Yeah, every once in
Like,
a while.
you know, there you go and there's just people sitting at booths and at tables and I just kind of, and they're waiting for someone to come over and be like, hello, I'm interested in your wares.
Yeah.
Like, I get why you don't want to be pushy, you don't want to be like the karate Parker. But when I would see people at Comic Cons that were successful, it was this sort of middle road where it wouldn't be this sort of like, here's the world's biggest ball of yarn. It wasn't like that obvious, but there'd be something about like inherently woven into the booth or the idea or the person where you're like, oh, that's interesting. And you'd go over there.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, most of the time no one does that because you're famous. Your ball of yarn is that you're famous.
Right.
Like, people just want to come see the giant ball of yarn, which is Frank Miller, or the autographs from Slaves and your favorite TV show.
Right.
So the real challenge, I think, is know the story, know the narrative, and then endeavor to build a community as opposed to try and get a following. And that's been a really interesting thing about what's happened. Story reaching out and being like, what should do? Like, what happened? And it's like, well, it seems like everybody's strategy is just to go find bigger accounts to post your stuff and then
Right.
hope that you have this attrition of that audience. The problem is that if you are staying in the same orbit of something, at some point you're gonna reach this sort of like maximum capacity or a threshold, I think, where it's like, okay, we know everybody in the Black Rifle community, we know everybody in the Stoics, we know everybody in the I don't know, like the office people community, or whatever
Yeah.
it is you're trying to
Yeah.
build. You at some point after years of targeted ads and doing this sort of like overlapping like collab cross branding thing, which I don't think is bad, by the way. It's
Mhm.
just that I don't think it's the only thing you can do. And it seems like that's what everybody's been trying to do. And I didn't want to do that. With Photo West. I wanted the audience to show up when they did show up to be there for Go to the West, not because somebody that was cooler than me, quote unquote, was like, man, you should really like,
Right.
which is not bad if it does happen, but it's again, it's not a complete strategy. I don't
Sure.
think. It's a tactic.
So let's look at, I mean, I know all of this is happening at such a rate where it kind of took you by surprise, you said before. And so I am curious, like you've done a couple of posts the last couple of days about things that you have ideas for that you want to do with it and make it about them. And part of those things that I've loved, like you're sharing these quotes and these things that are trying to help push people to a lot of these older either writers or other artists or these things that are in this same theme, right? Like you've done Louis L'Amour, like you've done all these things. And again, that's another one. Like I grew up watching John Wayne with my dad, right? Like this whole thing, like I said, in many ways, I'm the target demo for this in a lot of ways.
You and me both, man. You and me both.
And so looking ahead, like what are, a few of these things that you have these ideas? The blown up part of this didn't necessarily happen. I know that there's parts in your brain that like, I have this idea for what I want this to be. Like, what does that kind of stuff look like?
Well, I mean, like there's a lot of things that occurred in the past year. And I mean, this isn't just because of your podcast, but like one of the things that happened was I got healthy. And, I just sort of put it off for years, never prioritized it. And after I left Black Rifle, my stepdad, I was up in northern Idaho, and he'd come up with me to Josh's opening at Frishtown, the new facility.
Yep.
And I just decided to go home for a little bit after that, and he was mad to go on a heart medicine, for blood pressure and all this stuff that he didn't lose weight. And so this doctor was like, if you don't want to do that, you're gonna have to try to, or if you don't want to go into pills, rather, you're gonna have to try to get healthy.
Right.
And out of solidarity, I was like, well, I'll do it with you. At first it was more just like change what we were eating. And the next thing he said, well, we gotta cut out cheese. I was like, you motherfucker.
Sorry, like, what?
I was pissed. But the reason I say this, though, is that, like, I would love to know the science behind this. I know that there's all sorts of catechisms on the internet, especially social media, about, like the Bedros kind of stuff, and like the guys who are like, you should buy right, but you buy right kind of thing. Like,
sure.
And I get it. But I wonder if there's like an actual scientific correlation between like valuing and being mindful of like the intention that is required, intention and attention that is required to be deliberate in what you eat, what you do, how you move through that. Because I do think that there's a combination of like me feeling better about myself, me physically, literally feeling better, and then, be like a winner, I guess, to put it simply,
sure.
It's a little bit easier to be the face of something if you're not a Jabba the Hutt, though it's not required. Jelly Roll's a good example of that. And in all honesty, it's like, you don't have to look like a certain thing to really seek it at home. So the reason why I'm doing all this stuff is that I took that time and really didn't do anything for the West. Like I was focusing on like this representing code, doing uncomfortable things, getting better tomorrow. One of the things I believed and had been trying to say, but had to take the uncomfortable look at myself and realize like I ain't doing everything.
Yeah.
Like I could. So with how that relates to what I want to do with Code of the West Future is I want it to not just be this portal that we look through on Instagram. Like, we can interact and, that's cool. But I want it to bleed out into the real world in this some way. And that's what I hope when I'm saying, like, take what we're talking about in the caption or the quote, go hold the door with somebody. Wink, say hi, tell the little kid, tell the little boy or girl who opens the door for somebody, like, good job. They reinforce that shit. And so I don't know, like, I'm not trying to do like the lions, not sheep sort of community, nor am I trying to do like, Windstrong. I don't have the resources or the ability or the knowledge to do those things. It's more like I want to try to like bring back this idea of community involvement. Like I was thinking about last night, like I'm not really super churchy, haven't been for a long time, but I was like, does anybody put church on Sunday anymore? Because I realized, I'm like, man, everybody I knew, like, Sunday morning, basically whatever town you were in, shut down because they either went to the Methodist church or we went to the Catholic church or think about where it was. And it was like this moment where you could kind of like meet your neighbors, hang out, have some crappy cookies in the basement, drink some news, talk about what's going on, talk about Susan who doesn't mow the lawn on the corner of Bishop Drive and State Street or whatever, like, and I'm like, man, that, if I'm active, I know people still do go to church, but I don't feel like it is as ubiquitous as it once was. And I'm like, man, if I could, and I'm not trying to start a religion either, but that, I would love Code of the West to be that kind of thing to some degree, where it's like, but on this sort of like national and almost international scale of like, this is the place that we get together and we don't sit around in Kabesh. We get around and talk about like, how do we do something better? How do we mentor kids in the community? How do we get people on horses? How do we, any number of things. Like, I mean, it's, even though it's an experiment in storytelling, like we did talk about, like it's an experiment in storytelling in an effort to get to this point that I'm talking about right now. I was like, this is real in my mind. Like, and I'm getting messages from people from all over the world. People are basically asking it as if I'm the arbiter of what was here, which is silly. Like, hope it's okay. I'm from New Zealand, but I really believe in this. It's like, yeah.
Right.
Like, so, there's little silly things that I've talked about, like doing pen pals or whatever. Some people were, after they listened to the podcast that put up yesterday, were like, maybe you could do a business directory, of people who were like, I don't know, I mean, farriers, jewelry makers, whatever, like, I'd have to find a way to like make that sustainable. And like, I've been trying to do this basically without charging money for it, like the gears and background of everything. Like, if you want to have a shirt or a hat and kind of represent it, cool, it's there, but that's not I'm not optimizing to sell t-shirts. I'm optimizing to try to save the soul of America.
Yeah.
And so I think the way you do it is everybody kind of holds down their core things.
I like that a lot. And that because I was looking at the actual code post that you did with,
I lost you there again for a second. And probably come back to it.
Oh, there we are. Got you back.
There you are. There you're back. You're back.
I was looking at the post that you did where you actually had the 10-point, the code of the West.
Yeah.
Which I love, because again, it's things like what you said at a time probably were just the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't something that needed written down, because it was just taught and understood and people got it, but I think that's one of the things that there's a lot of that has been lost, and having a visual thing.
Come on back.
Oh, I'm back. Am I back?
There you are.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on with it. I think it's my internet too, all of a sudden. But having, after these things disappearing for, or fading over the last few decades, there are people that aren't even tied to what was the standard of ethics, you could say, for the majority of the country's history, at least. And so having like the actual visual bullet points, even as just a starting point or a reference point for somebody, it's like, oh, me and you look at this and we're like, well, but it's like somebody else is like, wow, this is actually, this is actually really helpful. Like, I'm actually gleaning something from this, which I think is the really cool potential for it. So there's a lot of things that I think have the potential to tie people who otherwise have no dog in the West fight, or have no like experience with it, where, like you said, it doesn't have to be for somebody who's literally like me from the middle of the West. It was embedded in a lot of this stuff my whole life. It doesn't have to be just for that person, but it's more like the idea.
And that's the mistake that a lot of these Western brands make, is that, because they're like, it's kind of like a different version of like the tactical shadow band conversation that constantly happens.
Totally.
Where like the Western conversation tends to be like, well, I guess it's okay that Beyonce made a song, and I guess it's okay that Yellowstone's a thing. And it's like, well, okay, either you don't care or you care, like, but don't be in this like middle ground lukewarm thing. It's like, and it seems to be more of like, let's talk about who really can be a cowboy or who can't be a cowboy.
Right.
That's not what Code of the West is about.
Yeah.
Code of the West is about basically it's about who would be in the West, and actually Evan and I talked about this at one point, when I was gonna roll into Black Rifle, like the story of the West is a story of, like, it's an international story.
Yeah.
Like, at this point in time, in that sort of deconstructionist postmodern place that we're looking at it from, it's just cowboys, and it's just white American cowboy guys. Like, if you were living in it, it was like vaqueros. It's obviously indigenous people. It's people who are kind of from Scandinavia and like getting on a mining train and getting their asses shot off like by robbers. Like this. It was a story that brought people to America. This idea of freedom and the ability to reshape yourself and make your own destiny. Like that, it became the myth of America.
Right.
And so it's not so much like, just like, I want John Wayne to say to make more money. I'm not against it, but it's like John Wayne, and it actually was interesting even in one of his biographies. His real name's not John Wayne. I don't know if you knew that.
Yep.
But he describes it as like he is a guy that plays John Wayne, who is John Wayne in a movie.
Right.
And that's that. I've thought about that for years. Or like that's why there was so much consistency in those movies. I think, and his movies is that like he's playing an archetype.
Yeah.
He's aware that John Wayne is an archetype.
Yep.
And I think that's really where, when people ask like what happened, it's like it's actually really simple. I just figured out how to tell a story.
Yeah.
The complexity of that is all the choices that are made in order to figure out what the distilled version of the story is, which is still figuring out. Excuse me. But it's not just sort of like inclusive as a buzzword. It's like, no, it's just, it is the inclusive. It's the West. It's like, it was just a big ass open area. Like, if you could hold it, you got it.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
And so therefore a lot of people from different places showed up here, and what was cool is that almost immediately their identity became what they were remaking themselves into. It was no longer like, I'm from Scandinavia, and now I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, I'm an American. I'm here.
Yeah.
Boom. I brought the cows. Like, we're gonna have dairy or whatever
Yeah.
it is. Like, and still like that's why I'm still figuring out how to tell that part of the story a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But just like the everybody aspect of it, because it's been super easy to just, and cool to pull up and see Wyatt and Frederick Remington and a lot of these like classic illustrators, but it's like it's all basically just drew the same thing, the same set of guys doing like cowboy stuff, and so like for me it's been trying to figure out like, okay, at some point I want to do like, not like I'm not here to tell history lessons. Like Jack Carter does a great job, I think, of being entertaining his account of what he's doing, as a writer, and also being like, hey, in this day in history, like this terrorist thing happened, or Louis L'Amour was born. I thought about doing something like that, but like I kind of want to live in the realm of the romance, in the story, and so it's more like, okay, how do I just show the story of everybody better eventually? Because it's not like I'm like, I need to hit the quota for like in terms of like indigenous people and African Americans and vaqueros. It's just more like, it's just boring. It's just boring to tell that story over and over. Like,
Right.
And I think that it's going to be fun to figure that out. Like, because I got a lot of friends that grew up in reses, and see what you want about Taylor Sheridan in Yellowstone. I think one of the coolest things that he's done is he's opened up a conversation about what it's like to be, an indigenous person, and like be a res, like Wind River. There's been a lot of people talking about stuff that happens to as far as trafficking goes and homicides, like, so like when people are like, well, sure, it's like, well, are you out there talking about war turning movement?
Right.
Like what? There's so much more to talk about, and so that's the thing that overwhelms me, and like it doesn't scare me, but like that's the thing that's kind of keeping me up now. It's like, okay, I know how to keep this train rolling as it is at the moment, but like you said, it's just for me, it's already stuff that's boring. It's just like, well, how do I evolve this? How do I get more people involved? And the fact, I didn't think I was going to get a bunch of international people showing up.
Yeah,
and
that's
talking.
cool.
So like, I just don't know what to do with it now. I mean, and maybe I'll do anything. Maybe I'll change anything at all for all of us we're talking about. Like, and I don't think that I would change the intent or the format really. It's more like, how do I do things better? Like, even just posting the same animation last night that I did, it was fun.
Yeah,
Like,
that
I
was
don't think
good.
everything's there to be like super serious and you telling you about some sad thing that happened to me and here's the lesson in it.
Right.
But that kind of scares me, honestly, a little bit too sometimes, of being like, ooh, like, is this acceptable? I don't, I'm good to say it's not. Like, this is coalesce. Like, it's experiment in real time, just like America.
That's awesome, dude. Before we head out, I want to see if you've got, we've talked about all of these different influences across all of these different mediums that helped kind of get you to this point. So do you have like a list or like a handful if somebody's coming in, they're like, I just want to learn about this idea, this time, the history part of it. Like, who would you point people to, if it's authors, or even if they're people like just wanting to understand maybe some of the comic book history stuff of like the style, like what are a handful of the things that you would recommend people go read or check out or watch or anything in that regard?
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I mean, it's coalesced is just stoicism basically, and I think it's a slightly easier value proposition to be like, hey, you want to learn about cowboys? Then like, hey, do you want to learn about like one of the last emperors of Rome? And his thoughts on society and the world, like, it's just,
yeah,
the story is a little bit more relatable, I think, to us now. And so I would say meditations. And I've been people have been asking for recommendations a lot. As far as books go, I've just been telling, as it pertains to Lou and Laura especially, I've just been saying Hondo to most people, because most of the people that are finding Page have seen like the John Wayne movies or have seen like the John Ford version that I'm talking about. So the best sort of overlap then is like read a book by Louis L'Amour that was adapted into a really good John Wayne movie. Like that's a good, I think, starting point for that. And I don't. It's not that I don't want to give my secrets away. It's just I just don't know if everybody would really be into the esoteric stuff that I'm into.
Sure.
But I tend to like things that are a bit divisive is not the right way of saying it, but like there's a lot of Atlas Shrugged in Code of the West.
Sure.
And in terms of like how I'm doing it, personally. Like, I'm not saying like I'm a Randian hero. It's just that like it's my version of the strike, basically.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not. What's interesting is like there's no. It's a bit of a divergent for a second, but I think this is pertinent to say. I'm very pro-American in Code of the West. I'm like I said, it's mostly just like what I use on cowboy or white cowboys on horses right now, but it is what it is. But like, it's not turned into like no one's come after me yet.
Yeah,
I know that's probably gonna happen at some point, but like. I would have thought it would have been like immediate.
Sure.
That people would have been like, just wanting to tear it down or deconstruct it. And maybe, I don't know what's going on. It's like, maybe it's just the intention and the way that I'm talking about it. Cause it's not like I'm going, fuck you, America's better than everybody. It's like, hey, this is what we're about.
Right.
This is what we should be about. Anyways, This is what we used to be about. This is what we talked about being about, even if we fail at it at times. This is what we're striving for. The point in Code of the West is like, I feel like we just gave up even on the striving part. Like not only do I agree we have failed, at times, we have failed to even try to get better now. And that's what I'm trying to talk about. So maybe that's why people aren't really coming hot most of the time. Because it's like, when you go on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's like my team versus your team.
Right.
And Code of the West is like, man, if you're not an asshole, you can be on my team. That's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think that might be coming across a little bit because it's like, there's people getting on in the comments on that Paul Hardy video talking about like becoming nationalized citizens and like how it means, becoming a citizen was like the travesty of their life.
That's
and
cool.
Like, that's so fucking cool to me.
Cool.
Like, at a time when like, okay, immigration is a big, immigration and border is a huge part of the conversation. And like, I feel like the tendency would be to not want to touch any part of it with a 10-foot pole. But I'm like, this is cool. Like, like,
Yeah.
I think some people, not some people, I think that maybe there's a simple way to just acknowledge there's complexity to what our world is and what's going on. And that's the manners, that's the courteous aspect of it, I think, where it's like, oh, well, yeah, like I can't distill all my stuff down into this. That's not Chris is gonna be like, oh, listen here, my views and my philosophy and everything, nor would you. It requires conversations and engagement. And I don't want to just blame. I'm just so tired of everybody being like, well, social media ruined everything. It's like, it connected 7 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're telling me that like there's no way to try to use that to help people?
Right.
Like, that is a bullshit excuse to me. Just absolute complete bullshit. Like, that is just us being lazy and not trying, or just optimizing to sell shit or to get a following. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a martyr or selfless. I'm not selfless. I'm being selfish with this. Like, this is giving me purpose. Like, this gives me like something that I'm proud of. And that I'm greedy as hell about that. Like, I want that. I want to feel like I'm serving a purpose.
Yeah.
And like I said, I can't do it as a charity forever. I mean, I have to figure out a way to like survive if it becomes a thing more than it is now. But I think it's complete bullshit to just keep all the responsibility of where we're at right now onto a tool.
For sure.
It's like bringing a hammer for a bad house.
That's a really good way of putting it. And I think you're doing a great job of connecting a lot of that right now for people.
Trying.
Yeah, I really do.
I'm waiting to fail. Like, I'm waiting for like the, oh crap.
But
like moment.
But like you said before, if you do, that's like what one of 1,000, right? Like,
yeah. I'm bad way too good right now. Like, something's gonna have to happen. I'm around to get hit in the face with the ball.
I love it, man. Well, dude, thank you for making time to stop by and chat. I had a blast going over all this stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Obviously we've said it a million times, but Go to the West on Instagram. You've also got the website is it website.com? I think it's actually
it's .us. So it's just thecodofthewest.us.
And you've got merch up there, shirts with all the awesome designs and a bunch of other things, and a bunch of stuff that's going to be coming out soon. So go check out everything that Chris is doing. And dude, thank you again, man. I had a really great time.
No, I appreciate you. Thanks for letting me talk to you human.
Of course, dude. Anytime.